Let's just hope this audio is a bit better in this video compared to the last one. I apologize for that. Anyways, as a follow-up, I wanted to talk about how I do project management with a client, especially with the recent experience I've had with working with a particular client, and there's been some changes in the organization where I'm now directly dealing with the client and with a minimal team. And so I need to organize myself a bit better. And I was thinking about my experience with Jira in my last team, and the problem we were talking about was that, do we really need Jira? I mean, it's nice with the whole Atlassian suite with Bitbucket, Confluence, and then of course the Jira board, but Jira seems a bit overkill for a small team. If it's a larger team and you're working on a big project, it kind of makes sense. But on a small scale team, it just didn't really feel like you would utilize the full functionality of Jira. Now, it depends on the resources you have in the team, because my team was just a bunch of developers and it was very, very small. And with this current situation, it's a bit more smaller right now. So I wanted to show you what I do currently, and you can see I am on Trello. You can use any other tool you want, but I feel like Trello has been a stable tool, which I don't know it gets talked about as much anymore because they got bought out by Atlassian, but they've been pretty good. They've been pretty consistent. It does the job. Actually, it fits what we need. We don't need anything further and we don't need anything less. So this is the perfect tool for us. And there are templates already. So if I click on this Kanban template, so I'm used to using Kanban, and Kanban is a really nice agile methodology, and it worked perfectly with my team, and the client I'm dealing with has been pretty happy with it, because what essentially these Trello boards do is that it allows you another way to communicate and a bit more transparency. Because I feel like if you're small enough where you just have this small team with minimal people, I guess it's just not much of a worry to be transparent with the client, because let's say you create a feature, and let's say you create a ticket, and then you are working more towards it, and then all of a sudden you wanted to ask a question. Well, the client's right there. I mean, you can just tag them in and they will respond on the ticket. What usually happens in the workplace is that you can tag your team, and if your team is big enough, you would have a product owner, you would have a technical lead, you would have so many components. But when he's working on a small scale, you don't have any of that. You're on your own. So with this board, it lays out perfectly. You've got your backlog, design stage, to do, doing, code review, testing, done. It sets out a pretty nice framework because you can think in these stages and plan out your project accordingly. Now, what I like to do is to have like a weekly session with the client. So I work in weekly sprints, but you can do it fortnightly as well. I think weekly is pretty nice because you can catch up and see where you are in terms of the direction of the project, because they're paying you. You're trying to make sure you're maximizing value from their money, and so that they can continue working with you. And then you're also building that relationship. So what I like to do is see where we have this example task. I would make a bunch of these for the week, and I would say to the client, what do you think of these tasks on the surface level? I am making sure that I try to deliver these set of tasks, and this is the goal for the next week. And then the client talks about it, and then they talk about the direction they want to go with, because it's very progressive, especially in the industry I'm working with, where things can change rapidly. So you ask them, and then they say, yep, that's good. Oh, no, I want to go with this different direction. And you'll be like, okay, we can change that and then implement it. So yeah, and everything else is pretty straightforward because you would have these different stages. And of course, maybe you might not have a design stage and you are just prototyping like I was doing in my last video, and then you would see how everything goes. I mean, you probably still would have a design stage at some point, especially with mock-ups or let's say small wireframes. I mean, I'm not good at drawing, but if you have a designer team, this would be very useful. I mean, any sort of designer or even architecture as well. Let's say you're building infrastructure architecture and you want it to be a bit more complex. You would have that. Anyways, I don't want to ramble on too much, but essentially what I would do is this is where I would do my mapping, and then I would invite my client and any other team members that are working in the team, and I would try to make sure that everyone's up to speed. Another thing I would do is add power-ups. I think I need to create a board from this template, so I'll just do this. I'll keep it with the cards, and you can see I've got a bit more options. So I would add some automations and power-ups. Automations I am not really too fussed, but it's really nice. I haven't used it as much. I think we used it in Jira, especially with the Git progression, because we were using Bitbucket. And I think it works with GitHub as well, but I think we got there in the end. So one of the power-ups I would like to add is GitHub. So because I worked with GitHub on that project, so I would make sure that this is added and you can link your branch to the ticket. So everything is visible and other team members can jump on and see which branch you're working on. The other one I have is Clockify. Clockify is a time tracking tool. I might be a bit outdated on my choices, but that's what I'm used to. So Clockify is a tool to track time, and then you can build the clients using that. There's probably other options out there. I don't think Clockify is the only thing you have to use, but it's there. Although I think I had to use the web version because this one required me to pay for the API key. I think the API key is accessible, but it's just to use it on Trello or to use it integrated with other apps, I think you needed to pay. So that's why you can just download a Chrome extension for it. But like I said, there's other options out there. Anyways, this process would run fine, and then you get to the stage of code reviews and it goes in, and then the client gets informed on what's being done, and then it gives them a bit of confidence when things are moving well. Of course, there might be some hiccups and some things can take time. So one thing I do recommend is to make sure the tasks you're creating, you would have a description that's readable. So you would make sure that the task you're creating is both beneficial for you and the client. So when the client reads it, they're like, oh yeah, that's necessary for my product. I'm happy for them to working on it. I mean, there might be some other technical things like setups and all of that, and they will ask you questions and you would say, yeah, that's fine. But generally speaking, you want to make sure the tasks are at the surface level and it is achieving the goals of the specification you've been provided for the project. I mean, I wish I had an example, but let's say I would say create a form, and then what's this form about? I would say create form for sign up page so that users are able to fill in their information. And I would edit this description again and say create form for sign up. And you can be very detailed as well. So you could say why you are creating this. So you could say this is just for creating the interface. So that it can be integrated with the backend. Yeah, I type slow. And I mean, you could add multiple descriptions on it, but you just want to make sure it's understandable. You don't want to write this big story and it's like not readable. It's like, it's just too much. You can add pictures, you can add diagrams. Let's say if you have a design, then you can add the design on this ticket, and so that gives them a guide directly. Obviously, I don't have that right now. And then you can assign it to yourself and then add others into it. And you can do multiple things like add deadlines, you can add any custom fields. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. But one thing I do want to emphasize is that you do not want to make it a bit more complex, that you can't achieve it. You don't want to oversell it. And that takes time, because when I started as a junior, I made tickets so complex. I was create the whole sign up functionality. I don't think I went that far, but some tickets are way too big and needs to be broken down. If you can componentize it, not in the sense of front end, but if you can make different parts to it, moving parts that you can progress forward, that's enough to break it down to a ticket. Even if it sounds so simple, because you never know, it's coding. You never know what you're going to get. So that's what I wanted to emphasize here. And you don't have to use Trello. There's other tools as well. So one thing I do want to emphasize is that these are the features you get. It's so much enough. It's really enough. Honestly, for free, you're getting everything. You don't need anything more. And this is what I was talking about. You don't need to get Jira. You don't need to get ClickUp, even though they're really nice. But as you start scaling up and you find the need of using them, then you would head towards that direction or make your own. I mean, I've seen organizations making their own project management suite, but I mean, you would have to get a level where it's actually necessary, because it won't be really worth your time when it's just right there and you could be working on better stuff. I mean, if you have free time, of course, go for it, but I don't see the point right now. Although, now that I think of it, it's pretty tempting, so maybe. Another one I want to talk about is Linear. Linear is actually really nice because I was using with the project with a mate, and honestly, it's got a really nice interface. And I think it's up and coming, so there's quite a bit of developments going on here, but their interface is really nice. I've used it a while back. I haven't used it recently, but from what I remember, I've never had any issues with it. I would just make sure that you caution on the pricing and features and making sure what's going to be suitable for the long term. I think the 250 issue is not much of an issue later on, no pun intended, because you can archive them, and obviously you don't want a stack of tickets just in front of you. So I think that makes sense. Although I would make sure and keep an open mind to see, is this going to be worth if everything scales up well and I don't have to move boards, because it is a sort of like an investment. But if it's very minimal and you don't have more than like 3 people or 4 people, then you're all good. I think the ball is in your court and you can experiment. Todoist is another one. I've used it a couple of years ago because someone suggested it for a project, and I don't quite remember it, to be honest, but I think it did the job. And from what I'm reading, it's got a lot of nice features packed into it. So I would give it a try. I think if we look at the pricing, 5 personal projects, smart quick add, task reminders. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty generous as well. 1 week activity history. Yeah, I mean, I would suggest you try it. I'm not going to say that I know much about it, but it does seem promising, and at the time it's pretty nice. But yeah, I mean, if you've got an expanding team and if you want to invest in an ecosystem, I think ClickUp and Jira are the big ones, because ClickUp has a lot of features and they have a nice looking interface. I mean, that's what I've seen from the pictures and what other people have been telling me. But it is very promising. I guess it depends on the plan that you're trying to take. I think the free version is pretty generous. You just don't get the time tracking and the timesheets. But I mean, you could probably integrate something else or use an extension. I think those in enterprises might have more experience with this than me, so I probably shouldn't comment too much on it. But I do know Jira, and It's a lot, and it is useful. I'm not saying that Jira is not useful. It's just too much. I mean, you're not using the whole functionality. If you're not using the whole functionality, you're better off using Trello. And that's why I chose Trello instead of Jira, because that's all I needed. I just need a Kanban board. That's it. And a way to communicate with the client. I don't need anything else. But if I had a larger scale team, Jira, of course. I mean, many people in the industry use it. There's a good reason for that. And I guess Jira is pretty good with the way it works in terms of project management. You can customize Jira as well to your company's liking, but honestly, for the beginning, I wouldn't even worry about it. Plus the Atlassian suite. I've used the Atlassian suite, and Confluence is pretty helpful because you can link that documentation and refer to the ticket and it will instantly show up. I wish I could do a demo on it, but you cannot understand how useful that is, because you could just literally type in the documentation name or just add like a link and it will refer it. You wanted to add a branching reference from Bitbucket, done. It all works smoothly, and that's probably the best selling point for Atlassian, to be honest, because they've got a system running. It's got its ups and downs, but honestly, it works well. So yeah, I went on a different tangents, but ultimately, this is how I'm progressing, and honestly, it's worked out perfectly for me, and I'm sure people have other methods as well. So there's not really one way to go around it. There's multiple other ways, but I think the main message here is to start with something simple. Don't complicate any of the processes, especially if you're dealing with a very new client and you're by yourself, or if you're just working in a small team. You do not want to overcomplicate with all these different tools coming into play and be like, and then everyone's running their head and trying to figure out, oh, what tool am I supposed to use with this guy? And it just becomes a bit of a hassle, and you want to make sure you start off with the right note and maintain a good relationship. Anyways, if you really like this video, consider subscribing and let me know down in the comments on what you think and what are your approaches, and maybe some suggestions that other people can follow. So with that, I'll see you all later.